Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Conroy-Roth, and you're watching the latest episode of Lightning Leadership. With me is Duane Weber. Duane and I had an opportunity to connect a couple months ago. We were on a client site, and we had a chance to introduce ourselves and our companies. And Duane brought up my favorite topic of all time, how to be a trusted advisor. And so today we're going to talk about a book that changed my life, and I think it changed Duane's.
Thanks, man.
How to Be a Trusted Advisor by David Maister. And so, Duane, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Thank you, Teresa.
Oh my gosh. We also took that idea a couple of weeks ago and presented to a group of almost 70 people at an IT leadership workshop here. And we tag teamed this topic. And there were so many lessons that we shared, so many lessons that we learned from each other. And I had to have you on.
Thank you. It's great
So
to be
tell
here.
us a little about you and kind of what's so important for you about being a trusted advisor.
Yeah, so I'm a recovering entrepreneur. I've been a sales leader for many, many, many years now. And I think that the most successful salespeople are trusted advisors to their customers. There's all different types of salespeople, and Challenger Sales says relationship selling is dead. Not so sure that's the case, but I think the best salespeople are trusted advisors, and you can maintain a relationship at the same time as being a trusted advisor.
Yeah. I think that when I read this book, because I had someone give it to me, right, and said, I think you're a trusted advisor, you need to read this book. For me, it was about obviously relationship and relationship selling, but it also, I use it in my personal life. I use it in my corporate life, right? And so whether or not you're trying to influence a board of directors, whether or not you're trying to be a trusted advisor to people at your peer level, or whether or not you're trying to be a trusted advisor and a great coach and a great mentor. There's so many tips and tricks that I learned that I use not only in the sales realm, right, but also with relationships. So one of the things I wanted to do a quick deep dive into was the trust quotient.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the trust quotient?
Sure can. I'd be happy to. So, yeah, David Maister in his book did some research and found out that there was really a formula for trust. So, applying some science, right, to the art of trust. And so, David Maister says that the formula for trust is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, and then all of that divided by self-orientation. So to give a little bit more context to it, and if you think about this, you make a great point. It's not just in sales, not just in consulting, but it's really everywhere. So credibility are your words, and your words matter, and people are measuring you by what you say. Reliability is what you do, and that could be in sales, getting people information when they want that information. And in your personal life, it's showing up when you say you're going to show up.
Yep.
And then the intimacy piece. And I look at intimacy in a couple of different ways. There's the personal intimacy, of course, where, in relationships, you're really, focused on that person and focused on, learning more. And I always say, then there's the business side, which is the point that a person starts talking to you about maybe things that you don't typically do for them, right? Where they say, hey, Teresa, I know you do this, but do you know somebody that could help me in this area?
Yeah.
Say, yep. So those three pieces are really important. But then the last piece is the self-orientation. And the self-orientation is really making it about the people that are with you, right? So it's what the saying is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Amen.
And yep, personal life, business life, most salespeople talk a little bit too much about themselves. They think the way they can build, relationship and connection is by telling them all about how great they are and how they can help the customer. But it's really the other way around. It's understand them, their needs, what they're looking for, what motivates, what drives them. How are you going to be able to fix some of the challenges and problems that they have?
I love it. When I think about the self-orientation, the word ego pops up, right? It's not necessarily about me at that
Yeah.
point. It's about them and being into them and doing
Yeah.
the research and asking the questions, right? Whether it be the research on their background or their company, right? Or the challenges that they might be going through and how you might be able to help.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical in building trust. And I think whether or not it's a relationship with a coworker or it's a relationship with someone you're trying to influence from a sales perspective,
Yeah.
right? I think there's a number of things, right? Everybody has a story, and everybody will tell you their story if you listen, right?
Yes.
The old adage that my grandmother had: "You have two ears and one mouth for a reason."
Hmm.
I haven't always haven't always kept that. On the other hand, right, it's
Yeah.
absolutely critical in providing a safe space and a confidential space for folks to tell you their stories.
Hmm.
The other thing that you mentioned for me, being a connector of people, right? I have a mental Rolodex of people's stories and the
Yeah.
challenges that they face. And one of the gifts that I have, and one of the things that I absolutely love to do, is someone will tell me a story or a challenge, and my mental Rolodex starts absolutely spinning, right? Of who do I know that can help? How can I help them?
Hmm.
What story might I be able to share? What book might I be able to share? What industry expert can I connect them with? Right. And I think those are
Right.
all critical things for doing, not only doing business, but for building and keeping relationships, because you're doing help first and then
Hmm.
you're thinking about yourself second.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's fun. I mean, I have a blast with it.
Exactly. And that leads what you're talking about as well is the intimacy piece, right? You have these conversations with them where they're talking to you beyond just what you do and pure business. It's like, hey, Teresa, I got this challenge.
Yeah.
Do you have somebody that can solve it?
Well, and then I think a friend of mine, Linda Calvin, had once said that she would always ask people, "What keeps you up at night?
Hmm.
What are the challenges that you're facing? Because if I can help you solve one of those challenges, you're going to trust me,
Yeah.
right? You're going to know that I did something for goodness sake, right? And that's a great start for a relationship.
And when did they start opening up to you?
Um, after you provide
Yeah,
credibility, right?
exactly.
After you come in with something, right? After you
Hmm.
come in with being a knowledge expert, or um, show the fact that you have to show,
That's
right,
it.
credibility. You have to do something. You have to
Hmm.
show an interest in them. You have to listen. You have to provide empathy,
Yeah.
right? All of those are absolutely critical
Right.
in someone opening up. It's about them. It's not necessarily about you. And you have to come in with questions.
Exactly. Yeah, to your point about 2 ears, one mouth, sales, we talk about, 70-30 rule. So you're listening 70% of the time, you're talking 30% of the time. And that 30% of the time, you're asking a lot of really deep, good questions. You're approaching it with curiosity, not just simply,
Yes.
you know, I can't wait to fill in the blank and tell them how I can help them. But you're curious, genuinely
I
curious.
struggle with that, right? I really do, because sometimes I just get so excited, and
Right.
they've agreed that they're going to have lunch with you, and then
Hmm.
you do need to hold back. There are layers of natural inquisitiveness, right, that I
Right.
had to learn, and
Mhm.
now it's just part of my everyday. But I think there's some wisdom there. There's some confidence there. There's some techniques in the book that are
Mhm.
very simple. I mean, the book is not written at a traditional Buckingham or Gladwell level. It's really
Yeah.
written, right, as far as kind of a Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and
Mhm.
Influence People kind of level, with all
Sure.
sorts of lists and insights. But it's really just practicing some of the techniques in the book,
Yeah.
and I think it's an easier conversation to have.
Yeah, and I think the key is you mentioned it can be learned. I
Yes.
think so many people think it's fixed. I can't do this because it's just not my nature, but it really is. And if you can teach yourself to become curious, you're going to go a long ways. And so it can be learned.
Well, I mean, for me, the curiosity is, if I can ask a question and ask a question about a story, I might
Hmm.
not have to experience it because I've learned that story from somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that's been a blessing in so many different ways. or you hear the story and then you might go through the story yourself in 3 to 6 months. And then you're like, oh, I should really follow up with Jared because he had a great story on X, Y, and Z. I'm wondering what happened,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm going to need that story, or I'm going to need that confidant or that trust for that sharing.
It's true.
True.
Very true.
So when you look at the book and you look at the concept of empathy and just generally caring about someone or about a situation or a conversation, how do you mix empathy and listening?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, I'd say one of my biggest weaknesses for many years was empathy. I always, thought I had to be the guy that had all the answers, had to be that person. And then, so again, empathy is something that can be trained. You have to, practice it. You have to get much better at it. But then I think the empathy leads to the curiosity. If you're listening with empathy, then you're
Yeah.
going to be a lot more curious, and you're going to take more time to understand. And it needs to be genuine too, because I'm sure you've been around people where the empathy is just fake, right?
Oh
It's like,
yeah. Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
And I call it a BS meter, but your BS meter goes pretty high when you've got somebody who's kind of faking that. So
Mhm.
to be genuinely interested and genuinely curious, it takes a level of empathy. And
I think when you look at your own career and I look at mine,
mhm.
there are definitely times where I wish I could go back, right, and have a
Oh
different
yeah,
conversation or have a crucial conversation, or I wish I would have listened more. And I think some of that, looking back is hindsight's, always
always.
hindsight could be a good teacher,
Yeah, right.
depending on what battle you were in. But this book really sets aside, put your ego second, right?
Hmm.
And again, I think so oftentimes we're trying to climb the corporate ladder that we're not even thinking of other people, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's where, for me, throughout my career, that put your ego aside. Um, I think I wish I would have done it sooner, and so
Hmm.
that would be my number one tip
I
for the
love
book
it.
and for the
It's a
lessons
very good
learned.
point.
Right, is to put the ego aside and really
Yeah,
try. And that's again, when we look at managers versus leaders,
got it.
there's that symbiotic relationship between the two.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say in my last role, um, being a trusted advisor as a leader was really beneficial to the turnaround that the organization experienced, because I didn't come in saying, "Hey, you're going to do it my way, and this is how it's going to be."
Yeah.
First thing I did with the team was build trust. The whole concept of go slower to go faster. I slowed down to get to know them, practicing the empathy, listening to them, understanding kind of where their strengths lied, where they wanted to improve. And so when I started coaching them and leading them, they
Yeah.
wanted to be led because they felt like I was able to meet them where they're at to help them get there. So, you know, being a trust advisor as a leader is really important. And I love the fact that you talk about the difference between a manager and a leader, because that's a whole other topic.
We could talk about that one for hours.
Exactly,
I love
exactly.
it. I love it. Maybe we'll come on and do that next time. I don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you again for joining me. For those of you that have any questions or want more information, please reach out to Duane on LinkedIn. Um, we have other podcasts that are coming out. Please check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and of course, LinkedIn. Duane Weber, Trusted Advisor Master. Love it.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thanks so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
I loved it. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.